We're super excited to have you all. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're coming back, thanks for coming back. Welcome back. I'm super excited to be moderating today for the founder of Realworld, who's here with us today, Genevieve Ryan Belair. So we're going to be launching into this together. I'm very excited. Just to give you guys, for those who are new to this, a bit of an overview of the structure of the call. We'll start off with a bit of a Q&A, fireside chat, essentially, as far as we can do it with Zoom, until about like 9:05, 9:10. In the meantime, if you want to pop in questions into the Slido link, which Erin has put into the chat, I will keep an eye on it. And after that, we'll open up to those questions. I'll try to focus on the ones that have been upvoted the most, and those that seem relevant to the greatest number of people. And then that will go till about 9:30 or so. And then we'll open up for what our community calls the give and ask, which is essentially your time to give something to the community and ask for something from the community. We encourage you to do both of those at the same time. So if you have an ask, ideally match it with a give that you can offer the community. All right. So let's launch into it. Before we start formally into the interview, I'm Inez. I've been working a little bit with Erin and some others at Founders Friday to make this possible. My day job, though, is I'm a co-founder as well of a company called Skylight, and we focus on building resilient teams and preventing burnout. So that's where we're working at. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to ping me separately. But very excited to have you, Genevieve. Thank you so much for waking up early on a Friday morning to be here.
Delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course. Awesome. Well, let's jump right into it. So Realworld, the way that you described it on your website, you said Realworld is real help for real life, a comprehensive customized platform to make adulthood and life moments easier, which is a tall order. So maybe let's start off with something a bit personal about that. Maybe tell us about 2 or 3 times when you wish you'd had your own product as you went into adulthood.
Yeah, of course. And that's really kind of the founding story too, is that I failed at a lot of this adulting stuff. And so I really had wished that there was something like this. But yeah, I think the first time I realized how clueless I was about the real world and sort of all of these things across your finances and healthcare and taxes and retirement savings and everything was when I was dropped from my parents' health insurance plan at age 26. And give you a little bit of background on me as to how I got into that situation. But essentially, after graduating from college, I went straight into law and business school. I did a JD MBA program, which meant that I didn't actually enter the real world in my first full-time job until I was 26. And so there was a period of time between my 26th birthday, when I was in February, when I was dropped from my parents' health insurance plan I'd been on for a while, and when I started my first job. I was working at Goldman Sachs. And I remember one day going to fill a prescription and the pharmacy saying, you actually don't have any insurance. Like, you are no longer insured under this plan. Like, you might want to check into that. And it was one of those things that no one had really told me, or I'd never really come across, that when you are 26, if you're on your parents' health insurance plan, you get dropped and you need to sort of take positive action or proactive action to get a new plan, whether it's through the marketplace, whether it's through your school, whether it's your employer. And so that was one moment I wish I'd had our product, which is all about really helping inform people about those different decisions and then providing them step-by-step guidance to actually take action on them. That's a big one. I think the other thing that really, kind of looking backwards, I wish I had known earlier was the power of IRAs, and sort of to start saving for retirement, even if you don't have access to a 401k. Because since I started my career a little bit later, I was in school for so long, I had been making money and sort of working in different jobs over the summers and also during school that I could have put into a retirement savings account and taken advantage of compounding interest and all of those things, but just never crossed my mind. And so I missed out on really 4 to 5 years worth of time that I could have been saving that money. So again, things that you didn't really know, never exposed to. And that's kind of our whole vision, is to be able to make sure people are informed about those things and then really provide them guidance to kind of set them up.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I think we've all had those moments at some point in our lives where we were like, oh, if I only had known, I would have done this earlier. And no one tells you about it, right?
Yeah, well, no one tells you about it. And, my situation was that I'm the oldest kid in my family, which adds its own layer of kind of guinea pigness in terms of figuring out the real world.
Yeah.
Not having the older sibling or someone who can kind of tell you what you need to be thinking about or which product, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a double situation there.
So it's like the nice big brother, essentially, that you wish you had. Very nice. Well, I know that you released, your new product last week. Maybe that'll be helpful to setting the context a little bit for this conversation. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that before we launch into questions more targeted at the audience here.
Yeah, of course. I think to sort of accurately give you the context for this new product, I have to sort of take you back a little bit in terms of how so we started the company about 2.5 years ago. And when we started the business, we didn't really know exactly what product we wanted to create, because one of the things I hope we can talk a little bit about today is really just the idea of like creating a new category and having to define what that category is. And for us, helping people navigate the real world, just like you said, pretty tall order. It's not exactly clear what that product should be. But it was very clear to us that there was like a problem and there was a real need and there was a real vacuum. So when we started, the product that we had built was really focused on students and kind of closing that education gap around all things real world. So all the different decisions across your finances, your healthcare, even things like understanding a lease, renter's insurance, student loan repayment, and the like. And we built our initial kind of MVP product, which really was kind of a glorified course or online training program that introduced all those different subjects, but in a really engaging way. So animations, more like Gen Z millennial type of brand and vibe, I suppose. And we started working directly with colleges to be able to provide that to students before they graduated. We learned a ton from that experience, which I can go through, lots of failures along the way. But one of the biggest things that we learned was just that it's one thing to kind of like provide that information for people and that education. And I think that's still very valuable and much needed. But the reality is that until you're actually in the real world and making these decisions and mistakes, kind of to my own story as well, sort of like making those different decisions, you don't really realize the importance of those concepts, and you don't really know how to apply them necessarily. So this new product, something we've been working on as a team for really the last 9 months, and it's essentially this personalized platform that kind of creates like a real world account for you. So a place where you can keep track of your progress across these different things, your finances, understanding health insurance, etc. But most importantly, really provides you with a series of what we call playbooks, which are essentially step-by-step, like TurboTax-esque like flows across everything from switching your driver's license to a new state to, setting up your 401k and sort of what that paperwork looks like, how to walk through it, and really providing kind of that just in the moment and in the as guidance, rather than just kind of like, here's all this information for you. When we built that product, we knew that it had to be something that was actually really engaging and that was actually solving a problem in a more customized way. And so it really built upon a lot of the learnings we had from that educational platform, as well as things that we realized we needed to just create more of a personalized experience. So things like state-by-state guidance, things like if you have student loans versus don't have student loans, what that looks like. And so the platform in and of itself is still in the very early stages, I would say, of realizing that vision, but is a place where you can find resources and tools, but also kind of track your progress across them and track your achievements. And ultimately, we hope a place where you can kind of get benchmarks from other people. Because if you when it comes to the real world, most people make decisions about whether to get a certain credit card or different types of renter's insurance products or whatever it might be by asking friends. Like we talk about this all the time, just in terms of trusting people who've been there before you and kind of already made those decisions and ideally vetted different products and services. And so our hope is that in addition to just being a personalized platform, we can also really kind of form a community around it and around this life moment of starting out and provide a little bit more benchmarking for making those decisions. Everything from like product reviews to understanding how much people put into their 401ks or into their, how much they save each month, things like that from an anonymized perspective. So it makes it a little bit more of like a team effort.
Right. I mean, it's interesting what you said about how it has to be like just in time for people to really grasp like the importance of it, right? And how to deal with it and give it the gravitas that it needs, right? And I think that speaks to a lot of products in general, where it's, when it's not like hitting that need right in that moment, it's very difficult to find the fit, even if it's actually the best outcome for them to start before it's really an urgent need. So how, maybe let's talk about, like, you mentioned you wanted to also go through what it means to like be category defining. And I think one of the first questions I would want to understand if I was, sitting in someone's shoes who's thinking about creating something that's category defining is like, how did you think about focusing your time at the beginning of this? Like, where did you prioritize?
So I think the best answer to that is that I didn't do that effectively. That's sort of very, very hard in the beginning stages of building something where there's not really a playbook, to figure out where to spend your time. So it's a really good question. I think I can give you a little bit of sense. So after I left my job to start focusing, I spent almost a year becoming just a subject matter expert across this space. Sort of took it from the approach of, if we are building a new category and a new type of a product, you're going to need the same sort of research and understanding that you would if you were in pharma and building like a new drug, or really understanding kind of like the R&D to be able to build something new. So I was really lucky to be able to be, I served as an entrepreneur in residence out of a foundation that was focused on entrepreneurship, and I had sort of that time to be able to go deep in the space. And I really just started by like interviewing people and understanding the problem a little bit more acutely. So talking to people who were seniors in college, people who were a couple years out, like parents, employers, et cetera. And so I spent the first, I'd say, like 4 to 6 months solely focused on just listening and learning, and understanding what solutions were already out there from the market perspective, but more importantly, like what solutions people were already using as a substitute to be able to deal with this problem. And what it kept coming back to was that people would basically go to Google for kind of that in the moment guidance, which is somewhat helpful, I suppose, or they would just go to their parents, or they would ask like the older sibling or their friend for that information. So I would say the beginning stages was really just about learning and then pattern recognition. I had like massive Excel documents, just as like a tactical thing. I had like massive Excel documents with specific questions I asked on these different interviews. I had like 15-minute interviews, literally one after another, like set up days on end. I'd ask each person I interviewed to introduce me to one more person that they knew who I could talk to, like a cousin or a friend or a high school friend or whatever. So I just started building like literally 1,000 people spoke to during this time period. And once you have that many data points, you're kind of able to start picking out certain just things that people say or certain patterns there, both from a like problem space in terms of what are the areas we should focus on in terms of like your finances and student loans, and
Right.
but also just like what are people doing now? And so I think the beginning stages after that learning mode was just like, okay, it seems like if something could solve this problem or act in sort of this way, we could do something interesting.
Got you. Oh, sorry.
I was just saying, then the initial like finding there was like schools aren't doing anything about this, so maybe we can.
Interesting. So two questions just to be very tactical. I think one is, how do you know when it's enough? Like, how do you know when you've done enough of that, like, quote unquote customer research, and like you're actually getting too much data and it's not, it's not serving you well at some point, right? Like diminishing returns. And then the second question is, I'm sure you probably uncovered not just one problem, you probably uncovered like 10, 20 problems, right? So how did you think about narrowing down at that point of like, okay, I have all of these problems now, how do I pick?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think in terms of the diminishing returns piece, I'd say I sort of had in my head that the number like 1,000 was enough. And so I think at that point I was starting to see the same, just the same conversations were happening. And I talked to different enough people. So people at different life stages who had had different background experiences or whatever it might be, to feel like I had a decent swath of the market. That once you started seeing like a couple of things very clearly, and again, for us, it was like schools aren't doing anything about this. I go to my parents for support. Everything is disaggregated. There's like some information about finance here. There's like healthcare information over here, but there's not really like a one-stop shop. Like we kept hearing like, there's no one-stop shop. that was kind of like, okay, you know what, like maybe what we need to do is not focus on any one of those areas. To answer your question as to like, how did you decide which problem to solve? Because there were dozens, but rather to be a place that could then funnel people to the people who could actually solve those problems and be almost like the umbrella category or the umbrella for all of these.
Right.
And so I think that's how we decided to approach it. And, you know, in some ways you can't boil the ocean. So you can't be the place where all of those things come together way. And so our focus instead was, we're not going to be the experts in finance. We're not going to be the experts in healthcare, but we are going to be the experts at this life moment, which is real world entry, starting out, starting your first job, leaving campus, kind of starting to become independent. And we're going to go deep in that space. And then the way we can start doing that is to go where those people are, which is schools.
Excellent. So you've done your homework, you've decided what take you want on it. So now you've got this essentially moment that you're focusing on, right? Which is like becoming an expert and like becoming an adult, essentially. That's a really different, I think, place to be in than I think most product startups. And it really is like a truly different category. So what advice would you have for people who might be either thinking about creating a category defining, or at least like not in a traditional category business, or are already in one right now and trying to like decide how to navigate that?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, take it with a grain of salt because we made all sorts of mistakes. But I think the thing that I kept coming back to was like constant listening to people we were trying to sell to or people we were trying to appeal to, and being very flexible there in terms of, if you have enough conversations with people about what you're building, you're going to start learning like what they want and then being able to build a product for what they want rather than what you think they need. And that's the same in any type of business. But I think when you're trying to create a category, there's so much like education needed for the people that you're selling to about, number one, like why this is a problem. And I think lucky for us, like everyone knows this is a problem. This is like clearly young people are not prepared for the real world. It's just like a fact at this point. But the fact that school should own that problem was something that people, because to start, you know, I think our thesis as to why this problem has never been solved is that no one's owned it. You know, graduate from school, you haven't been exposed to this stuff. When you start your first job, they're not like, hey, let's walk through 401ks. It's like, here's your 401k paperwork. Hopefully you figure it out.
Totally.
And parents, you know, if you're sort of the typical college student graduating, which is sort of our initial focus market, like your parents think that you've gotten this education somewhere along the way. And oftentimes they just aren't the right ones to actually provide it for you. So we had to first educate our consumer, our sort of end user, as to why they should care about this problem and why the buck stopped with them. And so one of the things we tried to do pretty intentionally from the beginning was, and again, this was a slow process, but positioning ourselves as thought leaders in the space, and thought leaders in a space that like wasn't a space, and sort of creating that category just through narrative and being able to say, you know, whether it was through like we went to all the conferences, like we like wrote white papers, like we really tried to position ourselves for this longer game of being like, we are the real world company, like we are tackling this space here. It's a real problem with real consequences if, you know, young people don't get this right. And here's why like you guys should care and why you should really feel on yourself this. So tons of education, but then kind of like, again, listening and iterating off of that narrative, and being able to then be able to kind of position a product for something that they felt like, yes, this makes sense for me to be buying or for me to be taking ownership of.
So you might hate me for this, but I wanna deep dive a little bit into the mistakes that you made. And you know, if you don't want to go there, just say it. But I do think that we don't talk about that enough. And so, what would be the main mistakes that you made that you would say, you know, I made these mistakes and don't make the same ones, and here's how you can avoid them?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many just within this context. I think the focus piece is like the number one. So I think the thing when I think about like just myself as like a operator, founder, etc., like, I'm very much the person who's like, I can see the future. I can see where this product lives. I can see the world if we succeed. Like I can see that and try to work backwards. But when it comes to the day-to-day execution and like really focusing in on like what's the sequencing here, it's definitely something I've struggled, and I've tried to surround myself with people on our team who are really good at that, to sort of compensate for that. But in the early days, again, because you're trying to like create something out of nothing, you're trying to create this category that was not there. The focus is just even harder in terms of figuring out, one, where to spend your time, and two, when you're so passionate about what you're building and so acutely aware of how much of a problem it is, sometimes I think you can not be quite as objective in terms of the feedback you're getting from people. So like one thing that I think I kept coming back to and I've looked at in the past is that sometimes schools, when they would provide feedback, they provide tons of feedback, and I would almost minimize the feedback in a way where like, yeah, they might say that, but that's not really that important because we know that there's a problem here. We know that they're going to come onto this product eventually. And so I think just letting sort of that vision sometimes cloud the feedback we were getting, almost a little bit of the like, everyone's founder's startup is like their baby and no one's baby's ugly type of thing. We were very, very positive that what we were touching on was something that was really real. So I think one, not just being super objective and like, if something's not working, like look at the metrics. If something's not working, whether it's, you've reached out to 200 people at schools and only 10 are coming back to you, or you're in the wrong department you're reaching out to, or just from an end user engagement, if students aren't engaging with the platform, like really understanding those things and being more objective there. I think that was one. And I think the second thing too was, and this, I don't know if it was quite as much of a mistake, but it was just something that I think we should have focused in on a little bit more from the beginning, is that to start, and we've shifted away from this a bit, but to start, we were a B2B2C business. We had to kind of almost make like two cells. It was selling to the schools and then making sure that that message then got to the students, that this is something you need to engage with. This is something really valuable and helpful to you. And that's like two sales processes, which I think B2B2C companies can be absolutely amazing because they're scalable. Like you reach, through 40 partners, which is who we have now, 150,000 students. And so it's like, scale is really big, but at the same time, and it's a great way to build a moat and like all that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, you lose that end relationship with the user. So I think in the beginning, if we had been able to focus a little bit more on like, maybe we should have more of a bottom up type of strategy rather than a top down. Maybe this should come, maybe this should be something that we really kind of have more of a campus wide kind of engagement. And then it bubbles up to a point where schools are like, we need to take on this.
Can't ignore this. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And you see that actually in other, I would say like ed tech products, right? Where, companies have decided to go after teachers and like have the teacher really buy into the product, so much so that then you have 5 teachers in the principal's office being like, I want this product. And, that's when you get, the sale of this to the school. Well, and I think this is a great segue actually into talking a little bit about selling to untraditional clients. And when I say untraditional here, I mean, obviously like universities and educational bodies more generally. So can you say, what specifically would you advise if there's anyone on the call who is going after either universities or more generally education or untraditional buyers? What would be your 2 or 3 pieces of feedback or advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk specifically a ton about education, but I do think that it applies to with businesses more generally, like larger scale companies. Number one, pricing is always a challenge in terms of like getting it right. I think in some ways it's an iterative process, but in other ways you kind of have to look to the market and see like how much people are paying for other things and really just be flexible there. Like one way that we got early traction, and I mean, we work with 40 schools now, which doesn't sound like a ton, but in the education space, it's actually like an amazing amount, which was, we're very lucky because this product again was filling this void that was just not being addressed on campus. But the way we started getting that cycle in motion and creating that sense of FOMO, which ultimately was like every founder we talked to in the education space was like, you just got to create FOMO. You got to create something that this is not a product that would be like a nice to have. It's a product that goes from being like, oh, you don't have that product, school? Like you should, what are you doing to solve that problem on your own? So to get to that inflection point, we tried a couple of things. One is we offered like some free trials for different schools, particularly if you're working with large state schools, the sales cycle process is absolutely insane. Like it is literally crazy. And particularly if you're trying to sell a larger contract value, sometimes there needs to be like RFPs and like all sorts of different stuff you have to go through. So we positioned our product price wise to always be below that value so that we wouldn't have to go through that process with any of these schools, which, obviously cut into our revenue, but it made us be able to move rather quickly. Second was we did this one strategy that actually worked kind of effectively. We just totally made up, which was called the 50 States Initiative, which was we were going to offer a free pilot to the largest school in every state. And so like there was literally one day where I was on the phone with, I think I was on the phone with like 40 different states schools, which was just crazy. Being like, hello from Wyoming, hello from Hawaii, like hello from wherever. And it was just really cool because it was sort of like this opportunity to get in front of a lot of people. But the pitch was, we're all about, democratizing critical information. We've built this product. We think it's really valuable. We want to get it in front of schools, and we understand, we sort of empathize with you, school, that you have this process you have to go through. So we'd love to give you the chance to try it out early, sort of zero commitment on your end, and just a way to kind of see how it goes. And a lot of those converted, which was interesting, into schools that would have taken like a year to get into a perspective. And it just got us also to be able to say, like, we now work with X number of schools and we work with these schools. And so we just opened more conversations.
Yeah.
Still a painful process, I'd say, in terms of just like getting across the finish line, but it was sort of an easy hack that was just leadership, like trying to be like, we want to get in front of every student in every state, school, across the country. That sort of worked. But I'd say being flexible and being able to respond to what their needs are, whether it's like, we'd like to do a smaller pilot with X number of students, or we can say yes, but we can't say yes until like May 31st or whatever it might be, was one. And then second was just trying to, whatever it took to get across the finish line so we could start creating like that FOMO. There.
Very, very interesting, and definitely not easy. I've been in your shoes as well, so I know I know how that feels. Let's take a slightly different tangent, because I know that there's people probably on this call who are curious about this. So you went through Techstars in 2019 in the New York version, is that correct? Yeah. So two big things there. One, your biggest takeaways from having taken part in Techstars, and then number two, and maybe even more importantly, what's the hush tips that you would give the people on this call for how to increase their chances of getting in if that's something they're gunning for?
Yeah, absolutely. So headline, Techstars was amazing. It was a really transformative experience. I actually didn't have much faith in accelerators before going into this process and was hesitant to apply. But the experience totally exceeded expectations. And I think it really comes down to the people who are in the experience and the people who are in the program. We had an amazing managing director, Jenny Fielding, who is like a continual mentor of mine and really just was the reason we applied. And then we had 9 other companies. So it's, if you don't know very much about Techstars, essentially there's chapters across the world, and you get together with 9 other companies. So there's batches of 10. You all work in the same work environment for 3 months. You get a little bit of funding as well as sort of access to this massive network of mentors, and a ton of programming around things like how to sell, like how to budget your business, how to hire, how to do all these different, how to fire people, like how to do all these different things, almost like a mini MBA, but specifically focused on startups. And again, you're going through it with like all these other people, all these other founders who are at pretty much similar stage to you. It was an amazing experience in many ways for me. One, as a first-time founder, which I think if you are a first-time founder, and I like dabbled in a couple of entrepreneurial initiatives while I was in business school, but never really jumped in the deep end. It's very helpful just to get a sense as to how to prioritize your time and how to focus. Also pull yourself, I think, out of being in the business and really start working like on the business and start thinking and providing some of that like objective sort of perspective around like what's working, what's not, and just putting some metrics behind it. So that was very valuable. And then I think the other thing too is that you come out of it with 9 other founder friends or multiple other founder friends where you've been through the shared experience. And we went through it in 2019, so it ended in October. Now flash forward to like craziness of COVID, we've all been just talking all the time. People were sharing around like how to apply for the SBA loan stuff, how to do XYZ. Like people are really, really supportive. And so it's been amazing to have that like tight knit community. But I've also found just that being part of the Techstars program has also been more than just like those 10 people. It's really been like this very much larger network of not only mentors, which have been invaluable, and they're essentially like friends of Techstars that either have operational experience or investing, whatever it might be, and came in to talk with us and sort of across their disciplines. And we've stayed really connected to those folks now as we graduated, I should say. But amazing experience, like learned a ton, like our track record, like we hired multiple more people, our sales went through the roof, like everything really worked well.
Nice. How much are you being paid by Techstars to say all of this?
Yeah, Jenny, you're on the call. Truly, it was like an awesome experience, and I was like a non-believer, so I feel like it's important to kind of tell people that. And I think to that point though, it's really like what you make out of it. If you're in a moment in your company's trajectory, if you're too soon and you don't have enough proof points, it's probably not the right time to apply to something like that. And if you're past that, if you're like $1 million in revenue and things are working, it's enough of an equity cut where it's probably not worth your going through it as well.
Yeah.
Like at the right moment. In terms of like the tips to getting in, I think one is just like really try and get to know the team there, like get to know the people, get to know Jenny if you can, like get to know, or whatever Techstars program you're looking at, get to know people who've gone through the program who can provide references for you, just so you can get better position to have like a sense as to what the program is about, and them to know you. And then I also think you really have to tell the story of, like any sort of investor looking at your pitch, like how is this something that is like a huge business and a huge need and huge problem? And then why are you specifically able to be the one to solve that problem? And I think for us, like we were still very much in the early stages of building this whole school business, and like things were going well. They weren't going like amazingly well, but it was really at that moment where sort of realized we needed to build the product that we now have now, that sort of more personalized platform. But we were able to tell the story of like, we see a world where there's a single point of entry to the real world, and every one place you have benchmarks across these different categories, you have resources and tools, etc. And we're the people to solve it, because we've spent the last like year and a half plus becoming subject matter experts in the space, doing the calls with schools and going to the conferences and writing the white papers and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like founder market fit is super important.
Very cool. Very cool. So hopefully that was helpful to some of the people who are Techstars aspirational participants. Let's take another last tangent before we go into more open Q&A. It actually relates to one of the questions that's in Slido as well. So, one of the things that you mentioned white papers, you mentioned like the playbooks. So there's a lot of content creation in what you were doing or are still doing. How did you and your team think about creating content that really stuck? Like, what would be the very tactical things that you would tell someone who's trying to build a business on good content, at least initially? What would be like your couple of tips for them?
Yeah. The first thing around content is like, pretty quickly whether or not it's good, because people are either resonating with it or they're not. They're either sharing it, or they're, in our case, our initial content was videos as part of that online platform. And like, they're either watching the videos or they're not. So it's pretty easy to tell when content is good. I think in terms of creating it, there's kind of like a couple of things I would call to mind. One is, if you're a content business that's trying to get driven, just very tactically, if you're trying to get driven by SEO, like you have to bake that in from the beginning. You have to really think about what those different keywords are to even get it a chance to get in front of people. And so I think sort of being thoughtful there. But I think you also just have to have like a real point of view, and like that point of view has to come through in a very clear and kind of unadulterated way. And our point of view is that like adulthood should be easier. Like it just should. You should know these things. It should be something that isn't quite as challenging and filled with friction. And so for everything we've done, whether it's the video content or just like long form content we've done, or just like the playbooks themselves, they're really trying to be very like friendly and have a brand voice that's relatable. That's kind of like, it's okay that you don't know this stuff. It's okay that you haven't experienced this before, because why would you have experienced before? It's a new. So I think like having that point of view and that like brand voice is really important. But then secondly, like you have to provide value out of content. Like content shouldn't just exist for content's sake. It really should be something that someone learns from, that they can explore deeper through links, like whatever it might be. And so we've tried to make any content that we do as pithy and as kind of like tactical, I suppose, as possible, so that someone who's actually looking at it or listening to it is learning something. They're actually like being able to kind of take themselves to the next level. That's important. And then the last thing I would say, just for people making video content in particular, is we created these animated cartoon videos that talk about like credit and debt and all this sort of stuff, just because someone talking at you like this is less engaging than like watching a video, particularly if you're like 21 years old. And it was really important for us to make sure that people could see themselves in those characters. And there was like a wide range from a diversity perspective, everything from background to gender to ethnicity to kind of across the board, so that people could see like, this is content for me and this really resonates. So I think if you can do those things, at least initially, and also again, make sure it's just high quality in terms of the language and all of that, can be pretty helpful.
Absolutely. Well, we're nearing the end of our piece here. The last thing I want to ask you is to leave us with, as the expert on adulthood, and hopefully, we have graduated as well from, Realworld if we had gone through it. But what would be, your tactical thoughts of like, yeah, you may think that you've got adulthood covered, but this is what we keep seeing people don't do or don't do well, and that we can take forward, not just as entrepreneurs, or aspiring entrepreneurs, but also as just adults, right?
Ooh, I mean, so many things, but I think one like very small thing that we always talk about, because it's something people just don't do, is get renter's insurance. You are renting a home, particularly in a place like New York, like you should have renter's insurance. I have so many friends who have had, and if you listen to our podcast, actually, we interviewed this one woman who literally she'd lived in like 5 different places in New York, and like 3 of them he either caught on fire or flooded while she was in these apartments, and she had renter's insurance, and so she was fine, but like devastating experiences. Renter's insurance costs like $10 a month. It is super easy to set up, and you kind of set it and forget it. And literally it covers an insane amount of stuff, whether it's things that are in your apartment, like your TV, etc. It covers like certain types of damages. It covers you personal liability if someone gets like injured in your apartment. And it can sometimes even cover stuff that is outside of your apartment but should belong in your apartment, like your laptop. We had a friend whose laptop was stolen out of his car and it was covered by renter's insurance. I mean, it's crazy. So like that's one thing that if you don't have it, you really should get. And I think the other thing is really like the saving for retirement piece. If you are making money, like you can save for retirement. You can set up an IRA as long as it's earned income, even if you're still in school or if you're like, working on your own, but you're making some money in some capacity. The compounding interest element just is so important to start early. Like I wasn't able to start saving for retirement until 26 because I didn't set that stuff up. But if I had started at 22, when I actually was like making money, it would already be I would already have so much more kind of in the nest egg. So I think just setting that stuff up early, again, super easy to do, even going through like Betterment or Wealthfront, one of these robo-advisors that can set it up really quickly. It's just simple and it can save you so much longer term. I think those 2 things are definitely like, looking back, I wish someone had told me for sure. Applicable to most people. But I think the reality is, to your question, like we've graduated from adulting, but not really. Like I got married last year and had to file taxes for the first time as a married person this year. And it was the same decision process of like, file jointly, file separately. Like, what does that look like? What are the reasons to do one or the other? And I basically didn't have a playbook for that yet, but we will one day. And so trying to figure that stuff out, like these decisions totally end. So I think just trying to be as conscious as possible of ways to like protect yourself that can have real impact long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As someone who lived through a flooded apartment in Amsterdam myself, I can definitely vouch for it's important to have renter's insurance. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, we're going to open it up to the Q&A from the audience. I also want to state that I think we've like reached an all-time high record in terms of virtual participation. Which is like 80 people on the call. So congrats to everyone who's on the call. If you guys don't have it, the Slido link is a few steps above. Let me repost it one last time. I'm seeing a couple already in there that have been upvoted. Some of them we've already covered. So I'm going to go towards one that we haven't covered yet. So we have a question here. It's pretty precise on your website, saying your website looks amazing. How many developers and designers worked on it? And is it built on backend like WordPress or another CMS? If it was a contract designer, who was it?
Love it. First of all, thank you so much. It took a long time and I can talk a little bit about kind of how we thought about like branding and all of that. To start out, we totally worked off of like Squarespace and just very, very simple stuff because again, we were like iterating off of this message. We were changing our colors, we were changing all these different things. And so for a very long time, like it was one of those things where I was always very embarrassed about our website because it was just never like that experience and that like look and feel we wanted to convey. So about really when we decided to launch this new product, we decided we wanted to launch this new brand as well. We worked with a company called SDCO Partners, SDCO Partners out of, I think it's actually listed if you go all the way to the bottom of the website. They're out of Charleston. They're like the most wonderful people. And I would say compared to a lot of New York oriented like brand design agencies, they're way more affordable. We worked with them to bring the brand to life, one, which was kind of the look and feel you've seen, but more than that, we kind of looked to them to help design out this landing page of the site. So the landing page itself is a WordPress site. They built that element on their own with sort of our input. If you actually create an account and go into our product, it's all the product that we've built. And so it's sort of a typical web app construct, React, Rails, all of that. We have one full-time developer and 2 part-time developers who we work with. And we brought on a part-time designer to help us really, one, from a UX perspective, like build out the actual product itself. And it was cool because she had worked with Spotify and a number of different projects. And so if you go into the platform, you'll see like kind of elements of Spotify in the sense of like creating playlists, like we create like playbook playlists or like packages of life moments, almost like genres. And so she really brought like an interesting lens there. But we don't have an in-house designer. It's like one role I'd love to be able to hire for when we have additional capital. But they brought all of that together. Is that any other parts of that question I missed? Oh, Inez, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, I think you answered it all. Yeah, that was a great question, great answer. Let's see what else is here. What are some of the key things you did early on to establish yourself as a thought leader? Do you recommend any platforms? I think we covered the first one quite extensively. Maybe let's focus a little bit on the tactically, like any platforms or specific events that you would recommend.
Yeah, I think to be honest, one thing I actually did not feel like I did this super effectively. It's something that now that we're a little bit more established in terms of what our like product is and the sort of experience we're hoping to provide to users, I'd like to double down on more. But I think when you want to try and build any kind of thought leadership, you really have to focus on like one platform. So whether that's like becoming a Medium article writer and you're always writing on Medium, or whether it's like Twitter and you're constantly like tweeting about things and growing your audience there. Or it's interesting, actually, a lot of, I think, like visual companies have more focused on Instagram and the founders building up their Instagram presence. I did not do any of those things effectively. I sort of like dabbled in each one. And I think it's something I'm excited to focus on more. But I think from the beginning, particularly if you're good at writing, I think being able to just put your thoughts out there in a little bit more of that long form, like a Medium article, or trying to become like a Forbes contributor, things like that, can go a long way. Because when you have people who are looking to use your product or like want to buy your product, like these schools, they're going to look you up. And so if you can have, articles, things that you've written that just kind of talk about what you've learned, etc., can go a really far away. And then secondly, in terms of getting invited to speak at different things, like if you wanted to get invited to speak at a conference around your industry or something like that, people want to invite people who have more of that like voice already established. So spending some solid time, even if it's just like every Sunday you write an article or every Sunday you kind of think about how to do that more effectively, is really worthwhile. And it's something I wish I had done earlier on.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to build, and especially when you have so many priorities and you're thinking about, is this really gonna exactly.
I will say, like, I think one founder who did this so effectively was Emily Weiss from Glossier, because if you're familiar with Glossier, like the beauty brand company, they started as a blog called Into the Gloss, and it was basically her like interviewing other people about their beauty experiences, and she ended up getting in front of like really interesting people like Carly Kloss and like Ariana Huffington, and she just built her like thought leadership brand on this blog. And then when it was time to actually build a product, like she had the community already, and it was already ready to just activate. So I almost think that if you are someone who wants to build like a direct to consumer company, being able to spend that time early just building the community and then being able to like, pretty cool.
How would your answer change if you're selling not direct to consumer, but you're selling to universities or companies?
I think again, though, it comes back to like being where they are and providing value to them, like where they are. So an example, we've seen like a lot of companies do this effectively where they host different webinars, or they'll host like virtual conferences or actual conferences that just bring those leaders together in some capacity. And it's through like a thought leadership lens, like let's discuss this issue happening with the industry, but it still gets those people there. And then it positions them as the authority, or at the very least, like the moderator among all of these different people. So I think that's very effective, and being targeted about providing like content, but in a more like industry-wide discussion type of way.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, interesting. Let's see, what else do we have here? So interesting one. This one relates to the moat that you were talking about. So the question is, you probably weren't the first one to have this idea. So what made you different? How did you protect yourself from other people who were kind of gunning for the same thing? And what did you do that other people didn't?
It's a good question. It's interesting. I'm sure, I mean, this is such a real problem. I'm sure that this idea has been tried by a lot of people, and there's certainly other companies that are tackling like at least one element of this. I think the way that we in the beginning, we weren't like thinking about protecting ourselves. We were literally just trying to get the word out about what we were doing and just getting feedback off of it. But I think by, again, like closing contract by contract, we just became more of like the de facto product in the space. So if you're in a category in a space where there's no de facto product, like you can become like the Kleenex of that category. Like you can post it where it's, what is it? It's a piece of paper with sticky on the back, but it's a post-it for all purposes. So like if we could become like the Realworld product, and our name is Realworld, like we could kind of create that sense of just being the category leader, even if we only had like a handful of schools on board. One was just like the narrative telling and just trying to close those quickly to be able to get that momentum of feeling like we were building. And then I think the second is like continuing to iterate and continue any kind of competition, like continuing to iterate and listen to users to figure out the next best step for the product, which is how we got to our next product that we're live with. So I think it's just it's a tough thing, but I think between trying to get that moat going from like an institutional partner perspective and becoming the de facto product, as well as just, I should, mention community. I think like community is the best possible moat you can create. Like if you can get people excited about your vision and what you're building, like that's the best way to make sure that you're protected against competitors coming into the market. I feel like, just to harken back to Glossier again, like one of the reasons they've been able to do so well is just that they have this incredible community who are evangelists for them. And even smaller than like a Sephora or other types of beauty companies, they have that really protecting them. So I think whether it's like closing contracts to just start getting that sense of you becoming the de facto product, or again, more focused on that community element if you're direct to consumer. And in terms of like what we did differently, I don't know. I think it's just like I spent so much time just learning about this space and doing a deep dive and like just putting in the hours to kind of understand this problem space. It's also just a gnarly problem space to go after. Like you said, there's 1,000 problems in this one. So like after each of those different ones, and maybe it's just the first one to try and do it more from that umbrella perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So like to recap, it sounds like you're saying like the part of the moat is like, one, thought leadership, like really stand out there. Two is like create community. And then three is like sell, like show that what you have can be sticky and create that FOMO. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Do you think that's the right synthesis?
Totally. I think that's exactly right. And I think the other thing too is like if you can, part of it too is just like your brand. If you can create like a loved brand as well, like that brand of being like a digital older sister or older sibling is hopefully something that sort of distinguishes us and can kind of
Mm-hmm.
protect us from, you know, a larger institutional bank can't build
Right.
they just can't talk in the same way that we can talk, and appeal to that audience in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think linked to that question of the moat, there's a question around how open were you when you were talking to people about what you were building, right? Like how much did you reveal versus how much did you keep it close to the vest?
I'll be totally honest. I think like the idea of being like a stealth company is, I think it, unless you are building like truly like the next like Uber type of technology, I think it's a shame to not tell people what you're working on because at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, like it's all about execution. I'm sure tons of people have had this idea before us, but they didn't actually like do it. And so it really comes down to like, are you actually going to take this from 0 to 1? And if you don't tell people what you're working on, like the chance meetings and chance ways that people can help you don't exist. And so I think like we've been able to really rely on our network and build a decent network just from people being excited about what we're doing. And like every hire who's joined the company, it's always been about the mission. It's always been about like hearing about this sort of space we're in. So I'm a huge fan of, and again, unless you're building like some very, very specific technology that has a huge ability for someone else to copy, like
Mm-hmm.
you have to get out there.
Yeah.
Excited about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, then we have one other question that's also very tactical around any staffing or hiring tips, in particular, what you should continue to do yourself versus when to hire someone else to do it or outsource it.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely not the best person to talk through this, I think, because we've made all sorts of like mistakes. Maybe I am a better person because we made so many mistakes around all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think just in terms of hiring more generally, one issue that I had in the beginning was my network. Like I'm a lawyer by background. I'm not a traditional founder. I didn't come from working at like Google or Facebook or wherever, any of these different companies. And so my network when it came to startups was like pretty small. If I wanted to start another law firm, like great, lots of people I could talk to about that. Same with like an investment bank or things like that. And so when it came to start finding people to work with, you know, your first like I actually don't have a co-founder, but like your first co-founder, you know, first couple of hires typically come from people you've worked with before, who've worked in that space and sort of have that same kind of background. I didn't have that. And so it took me a while to really break into like the tech community in New York and just understand the startup space and also be able to find people who had the risk tolerance to join early. You know, when you're a first time founder, you're unproven, you're tackling this like space that's like the real world. I mean, there's like a lot of faith that people joining a company early need to have. So I think being able to find people who are like totally in it for the mission is super important, who are versatile in terms of their skill set and generalists enough where they can handle the changes that your company will go through. Because if we had hired, for example, someone who was just like a direct consumer marketing person as our first hire, and then we decided to go the school route, like that person would no longer have been helpful, or they would have had to really adjust. So finding a couple people who are like have a lot of skills early and are able to adapt to them and are also like hungry. So particularly like young people who are just really excited about it, is a way that we were able to start building our team early. Definitely made hiring mistakes along the way. And I think one of the things that I wish I had done was just that mentality of like hire slow, fire fast, and particularly don't hire from a position of, what's the right word? Don't hire from a position of like real need and like desperation. Like one role that we brought on was just something that I had to get off my plate. It was sort of the sales process around these schools, and
Mhm.
ended up hiring someone who was just not the right fit. And it became pretty clear in the first like 2 months that she was not the right fit. Um,
Mm.
she ended up leaving actually right before Techstars just because it was sort of clear that this was not the trajectory our company was.
Right.
But I think if we had, number one, just been a little bit more thoughtful around like the type of people we wanted to bring onto the team in terms of their skill set, the culture fit, like the hunger and sort of like the real passion,
Mhm.
would have been better.
Mm.
And then in terms of like what you can do yourself versus other people, the number one thing is like you only have limited resources. Like you have
Right.
to focus in on what you have. And the reality is I would love to have like 10 times larger of a team than we have, but we just, you know, obviously for different financial constraints can't do that. So I think the biggest things are like your core functions, whatever that is, you should really own. I think the founder should always own the product, even if you're not a product oriented person to start.
Mhm.
Learn how to become a product oriented person, because when it comes to user testing and feedback and all of that, like you really got to be the one, if you're the subject matter expert, like you've got to be the one who's iterating off of that.
Mhm. Mhm.
as soon as you can, bringing in someone in-house to help build that. We had initially like outsourced developers in the beginning who were amazing, and they're still partners of ours now. But the speed and sort of iteration that you can get from having someone actually sitting next to you every day, or like remote sitting next to you or whatever, every is so different. And so
Yeah.
bring in someone like that, I think it's really important. But in terms of things like marketing, in terms of things like, I don't know, like content creation, like creative, etc. Like just the example of working with the branding agency was so necessary. We don't have that expertise on our team. We have a really, really solid brand leader on our team, but in terms of the creative elements, like being able to work with someone else whose sole job is to do that, was very, very helpful. So yeah, I think it's just I think number one, like know what your priorities are in terms of what you need to get done, and have those core people on the team. Make sure that they're flexible in terms of their roles, in terms of how they sort of are looking at their own career trajectory within the company. And just make sure that you're also kind of like focused on finding people who are in it for the long run and there for the mission.
Yeah, there for the right reasons. Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna do, let me see, I think 2 more questions. One is on, and this is bringing together 2 or 3 different questions. Let's talk money a little bit. So there's a couple of questions around like, how did you like raise a pre-seed round? How do you make money? So tell us a little bit more, just because I want to kind of englobe a lot of these questions together, because I think they're getting at something similar. Tell us a little bit about how you make money and how you brought on investors.
Yeah. So again, first time founder, way harder to raise money. If you have built something successfully before, or even if your founding team has someone who's built something successfully before, I think it's just an easier ride. It's never easy, but it's an easier sort of path. We found our first investor was an operator himself. He had built a company in the university space that was he's now like a billionaire. Like he was very, very successful, and he had built his business around supporting the digital sports marketing rights of colleges across the country, packaging them and licensing them, and all of that kind of stuff. And he was also a dad of a 22-year-old. So he like number one understood the market, and number two understood like the problem space, because his kid was going through it at the same time. And he was our first check in. Like it gave us enough that was like all we needed to just get started. Raised tactically like convertible note, like made the terms and pricing, everything at the time sort of like reasonable around, what the different sort of, just given where we were as a company. That's how I hired the first person. I'd worked unpaid during that time for a while until we got that first check. And because it was a convertible note, we could kind of opportunistically take in capital over time as we needed to, and as we needed to hire more people without having to run like a very, very succinct process around a pre-seed. I felt like if I could go back, I think I might try and just really raise like $1 million up front and try and do that pre-seed round and put in the 3-4 months that it took to kind of do that, and then build out the founding team from there. Just because you'd have a little bit more capital. But at the same time, again, back to the whole, like, there's no playbook for when you're creating a category. The proof points, you have to kind of hit a couple of proof points for people to be able to be interested in investing in you. If you're creating the next like amazing, I don't know, like beverage company, like those metrics that you need to hit are already really clear. And like the process is pretty clear. It's more just like, do we trust you? Is it a big enough market? Like, do we trust that you can do it? Like, are you going to create a great brand and experience? Like, great. If we believe that, we can invest in you. Here, it's like, we're going to help people navigate life. Like, it's very much a different experience. And that initial check was very much a like believer in us type of a check. So I think if you can pull it off and raise like a pre-seed round early from people that you trust, because these people, again, will be with you like forever throughout the entire company. I think it's worth trying. But if you are trying to create something very different, you just have to recognize it might be a little bit slower, and you might need to make a couple of proof points before you can get people. So we ended up just opportunistically kind of taking in capital. We raised, I think, a total of like $600K before Techstars, and then had Techstars obviously put in money as well. And then had a couple of other like scout checks from VCs who were interested when we haven't raised a proper seed yet, but when we raised like a proper seed, who are interested in just getting in early, which was great just to have a little bit more exposure to the VC side, just angel side. But we tried to focus as much as possible, and I'm really glad we did, on people who had built businesses who were investing in us, because I've just found, you know, that investors who have had that operational experience of actually like starting a company, and whether it like failed or succeeded, just being able to see around corners has been wildly helpful. Just particularly even now during COVID, like focusing on operations, like focusing on the things that can kind of get us from A to B. It's been very, very clear. So that's that. And then in terms of how we make money, so we're a subscription business. When we work with schools, we provide an annual subscription to licensing that educational platform I described earlier. Schools buy it on behalf of their students, and it's kind of, again, that B2B2C model. We do the same thing, by the way, for employers. We didn't really talk about this, but we also work with companies like Macy's to support their early career talent through all of this different types of stuff. And then this new product is also subscription based, but it's like a monthly subscription. So it's $5 a month for you to sign up and essentially have like a real world membership, which ultimately will include things like in-person events and sort of all sorts of other stuff. But for now is really that real world account. And then ultimately, we're not focused on this right now, but as you can imagine, there's a huge affiliate play to be made here, just given that we cover categories across like all of these different products and services. Right now, we've really tried to establish ourselves as like that trusted brand and authority. So we're not monetizing any products that are on the site. They're just purely the products that we think are really good. But we've been approached by a number of those companies to be able to build out more like strategic relationships with them. And I think the way we're thinking about it is like, we're always going to be on the side of the consumer. So if there are companies that we think are really great, that provide good value to our customers, we'll monetize through affiliate fees and things like that, kind of like a marketplace model.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. The last thing we're going to do here before we go into give and ask, if you guys want to all go into the Slido, and if there is, you know, a question you want to upvote, do it now, because I'm going to pick a last question, and it'll depend on, I have a lot of questions that are just like one person who's asked it. So I want to make sure that we're focusing the attention on where it's needed the most. So I'm going to push you guys to like do a bit of crowd voting so that we can focus in on something that makes the most sense at this point. Also, I'll give you guys like 30 seconds or so to get into the Slido.
Ready for my next cup of coffee.
I know, right? After we've hounded you with questions for the last hour.
Nice. It's great you guys do this. And it's also just great everyone's like still staying in touch during all of this craziness.
I know. I can tell you though, it's we are missing the fireside and the like nice, you know, wooden background. Maybe we should have like a fake version of like, yeah, exactly. All right, I'm gonna refresh one last time. Last times to cast your vote. All right, I like this system. Now I'm getting a little bit more clarity. All right. All right, so there's been a couple of these seem to have boiled up. The one that seems to have gotten the most votes that we haven't touched upon is, as a non-technical founder, how did you go about finding your first in-house technical dev resource?
Oh, for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe for you.
I didn't know if we were doing give and ask. So we found our first technical dev resource through friends of friends. So again, didn't have a tech background, didn't have a ton of like software engineers I was working with all the time, which is definitely the way to go to find that first dev. And we ended up working with a great firm called Future Foundry, and they are like US based. They provide kind of a full suite of services in terms of everything from like backend, front end, DevOps, etc. And at the time when we started working with them, it was these two brothers who got to know super well over the last couple of years, and I've been able to see their business grow as well to a larger team. But the way we tried to structure it was very much like having a developer on our team, so that like integrated into our Slack and, you know, worked with us on different projects. But it wasn't like, here's this project, here's this thing I want to build, which I definitely learned the hard way working with developers. Here's the thing I want to build, like, please go build it, as opposed to like, hey, we want to like think about this feature, like, let's work more collaboratively to figure it out. And so that's how we found them initially. I think there's all sorts of dev shops out there. There's so many different types of things there's so many different types of ways that you can find developers. I do think finding people who can slip into your organization a little bit more kind of like seamlessly is the way to go, rather than like hiring a big shop to build some product. Because again, your product will change. Like we went through like 16 different iterations of our product over the last 2 years. Like it will change so much. And one thing I didn't say, but I think it's like a very important tactical thing to be clear for anyone who's trying to build a tech company, is before you write like any code at all, you should design out and test on InVision or Figma or something else, like your vision for the product, so that, and test it with your users to make sure that what you're building before you actually build it is resonating. And like iterate off of just those plain screens that can literally be very low fidelity, but just like that whole vision together. Because as soon as you start building code, it's so much more expensive. Like you have to go backwards if things are not right. So thinking there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great pieces of advice there. And yeah, definitely something that it's tempting to just go straight into the like build it. But yeah, absolutely great advice. All right. Thank you so much, Genevieve. We're gonna transfer into the last piece of this, which is the give and ask. So for those of you that are not familiar with this, the give and ask is your opportunity to give back to the community and to get something from the community. We encourage people to partner those two or marry those two. So if you have an ask, try to give something to the community as well. The way we're going to do this is if you have a give and ask, if you can just like put a note into the chat to me directly, and then I'll ask you to unmute yourself, say your give and ask, and then write it after you've said it in the general chat to everyone, so that your details are in the group chat. And Genevieve, of course, if you have something you want to offer or you want to start us off, you know, feel free to.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun. Hopefully it was helpful. And if there's anything that I said that people like want to follow up on or have questions about, feel free to just email me. It's just Genevieve at realworldplaybook.com. But I guess my give is that one of the things we did after COVID was, well, two things after kind of everything came together with COVID. We wrote this kind of survival guide for adulting during COVID. So everything from like dealing with rental payments to stopping your utilities to like dealing with interest around student loans and deferment forbearance and stuff. So if you know anyone who's particularly that like 20 something age who has been laid off or is trying to figure out like what they're doing, we have this really great resource. It's pretty comprehensive. Talks about even how to get like the check from the government and all that kind of stuff. You can find it on our site if you go into our blog. So it's just realworldplaybook.com/recess. As well as if you have anyone who's a graduating senior in your life, we offered our course for free for anyone who's graduating senior. They can just find it on our site and they have to insert the code RealWorldReady. So it's just like a way for them to learn about all these different subjects during this crazy time. And the ask is just if you can tell people about what we're building. We're still an early company, and it's really about getting people who are like evangelists and believe in what we're doing now to learn more about it. That would be awesome.
Fantastic. All right. Maybe you just write it into the chat after this, so that we have a written proof point or written version of it. Appreciate all of those gives. There's a lot of gives. So I have Dylan. Do you want to unmute yourself and do a give and ask? Did we lose Dylan? Maybe you're on mute. You need to be unmuted. Okay, hold on.
There we go. So first, thank you, Genevieve, for an amazing presentation. I'm actually a college student. I'm a senior and I'm about to graduate, so I will check out your free course. Since being in college, during my sophomore year, I started a business selling products on Amazon. And since then, I've also had experience in digital marketing. So my give is if anyone, especially during this whole pandemic, if anyone needs help strategizing or just any way creating an online presence for your business, I would love to help you out. Hop on a call. My ask is pretty much just to expand my network and get as much work as possible. Obviously, we're all working from home now, and I'm about to graduate, so I'm going to have a lot more time on my hands, and I would love to focus on helping other entrepreneurs with their online presence. Yeah, I can leave all my information in the chat, my LinkedIn, email, and yeah, thank you very much for the presentation.
All right, and now I see Shell, you have your hand up. Let me unmute you if I can get to the, oh, this is annoying. There we go. You should be unmuted now. Let's see. It's not working for me. There we go.
I'll pass. The question that I have is already addressed.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Damien, you said you had, you raised
Sure.
your hand. You want to do a give and ask?
Yes. Again, great presentation. Really enjoyed it. My give is I've been toying with this platform called Powtoon, which is a 2D animation platform. So if anybody's curious about doing something, wants to do a simple little video, I can walk you through it. And I just did it. I bought the subscription for a year to do one video. So I have 58 more videos that apparently I can do. And my ask is, and I'm going to put it on my screen and in the chat, I'm looking for interviewers to do mock interviews for high school and college students in a few weeks. And Aaron's been an interviewer for me before, and I'll put that information in the chat. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Damien. Amy, do you want to go for it? I see you've already written a few things in the chat, but feel free to say it out loud.
Yes, thank you very much. This was a great experience. My give is I do career coaching. I provide free webinars for the New York Public Library, open to the public. I'm doing one of those soon. I do free webinars for Brooklyn College. And I also do free webinars for savvy ladies on things like hidden job market, how to interview, how to use LinkedIn. So if anyone's interested and they know someone who has either lost a job, as many people have, or they're not happy with their current job, I'm happy to provide them with free advice. I do have paid services as well. I noticed Damien said he wants people to do the interviewing. That's a lot of what I do with my clients, so I'm happy to provide that as well. Thank you so much.
Always nice when there's a nice match there of give and ask. Very nice. Thanks, Amy. And excited to see your coaching come to life. Terry, I see you've already written a few things also around coaching. Do you want to give your give and ask live?
Hi, sure. So my name is Terry. I have a feminist consulting business, and one of the services that I offer is coaching, executive coaching. So I'm happy to offer 1 hour of free executive coaching, which focuses really on providing and developing a framework for aligning your values with the work and the career that you're pursuing. And my ask is, I also, as part of my work, I founded a platform for connecting survivors, practitioners, and allies working in the domestic and gender-based violence space. And I would love for people to become a member. It's free. Check out my podcast, a weekly podcast on domestic violence. And we have a whole series recently on the gendered impact of COVID. And if you know of anyone who's a survivor, join our weekly call. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. All right, let me see. Kathleen, do you want to give and ask? I see your questions around angel community.
Oh, you on mute? Okay.
Yep.
Sure. I was like, Kathleen, that's me. I go by Kathy Moore.
Sorry.
I have to change my name on here. So, yeah, Angels, I started EF Angels, Executive Forum Angels, about 8 or 9 years ago. And we have we're a subgroup of executive forums. So we have usually 50, 60 angels at various points. We're figuring out how to live in this virtual world, but I'm always interested in talking to people. Often it's even free funding, and we follow them till they're ready for funding. And also, I co-founded Tech Up for Women, and you can go to our website. I put it in the comments. Tech Up for Women. We were named by Forbes as one of the top 5 inspiring conferences of 2018. And for this year, November, last year we had 2,000 plus at Javits Center. We doubt that's going to happen this year in terms of big groups gathering in New York. But we have Plan B, which will be a smaller live stream, or Plan C, how to go online totally. But we have lots and lots of information about technology innovation on our website. Thank you.
All right, then we have Nydia. Do you want to unmute? I think you should be unmuted. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Go for it.
Hi. So like the young college student man, like I also do social media. So I'm offering a social media audit, specifically Instagram and Facebook. My startup is Black Dina, and we amplify Afro Latinx and Caribbean stories. So that's like my give for anybody who needs to check to see if like their social media is even like doing anything. And then my ask is if anyone has like a social club, you know, that's doing pretty well, like I integrated like a social club into my business, and I'm having like a hard time with that. I have a huge engaged audience of over like 12,000 people that love my work. But like this, it's like crazy. It's like easier just to give them stuff for free. I'm like, why? I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah, so if anybody has info on that in any way, shape, or form, that would be awesome. And I'll put my stuff in the thing. blackdinamedia.com is my website, and I'm in the Dominican Republic, so that should be an issue because we're on Zoom. But yeah.
Thank you. All right, a couple more. I don't have anything but KT. I'm not sure if that's like initials or it's Katie, but you should be unmuted. You should be unmuted. Let's see, there we go.
Yeah. Hi, I'm KT. I am a social media strategist. So I have a small give. My company-wide focus is based out of Denver. I'm also starting my independent social media marketing agency as well. Right now, I'm just offering like 30-minute Zoom chats to talk about ways to support yourself with your marketing endeavors right now, and how to kind of switch hard sell tactics to more brand awareness campaigns and building out a brand profile on social. The thing that I do like to do, because we can't go get coffee in person, is I like to donate $10 to a local coffee house or barista every time I schedule one of these, as a way to like give back to people who are actually struggling as a small business. Especially considering how much we frequent coffee shops, I think it's important to make sure that they're still there. So if you're interested, this is mostly just a way to like, you know, give you some advice and also take some questions and let you know that we're here to support you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And then I have a 4 expertise marketing.
Hi, folks. My name's 4. Give and ask. So first of all, Genevieve, thank you very much. Ines, Aaron, thank you. It's just great to have an inside real perspective. I work for myself as an innovation advisor and product coach, and I'm glad to work with any member of Founders Friday about that. We can, work for free. The time limit, we'll figure that out. Talk to you about your product, your roadmap, your techniques, your team, customer journeys, UX, whatever, customer discovery. And the ask is, I'm building a marketplace for independent advisors and consultants and the people who hire them. So I'd love to talk to people for 15 or 30 minutes and hear what you need so that I can build the right product. I'll put all this in the chat. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Be safe.
Thank you. All right. I think we've covered everyone. If I have not, oh, I see Anna here. Sorry about that. Last one that I can see. If not, please ping me individually. Anna, I'm not sure I'm saying that right.
Hello, everyone. I'm not in a position to show my face at the moment. I'm in my pajamas still, but thank you.
We'll forgive you.
Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful interview. I took a lot of notes. It was really insightful. I have been in the beauty industry for 15 years, working for corporations, medium-sized and startups. At the moment, I have a company called agcasa.com. And we do two types of services. One is I act as an operating partner for founders or CEOs or CMOs that need help with strategy, whether it's sales, distribution, or marketing. And we also have classic agency services like branding, copy, etc. So my give is 30 minutes or more. I am flexible. If anyone is trying to build their own beauty brand or just started their own brand in personal care, I would be very happy to sit with them and give them some tips on anything that's strategic or execution or even like hiring the right team. And my ask is we've just launched an ebook called The Complete Guide of Sustainable Packaging. And I am trying to promote it for personal care, food, any industry that really uses packaging. There are over 20 sustainable packaging suppliers in the ebook. It's taken me 7 months to create that ebook. So I will leave the link here, and I just need to spread the word. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. All right, we have two more. Please keep it short because we're running out of time. So go straight to the point, and I may cut you off if we're running over time, so we make sure we have both go. So Varen, I've unmuted you.
Hi guys. I guess I'll be very quick. I'm a technical side founder. So for people that have needed help, and that's my give. If you need strategy, understanding, trying to figure out how to hire and fire people, how to build your digital product, all that kind of stuff, that's exactly what I do. So I can help you out with that. And I would do that as a free courtesy, just as a strategy call, email, whatever you need with that. Have tons of experience in that. My undergraduate was in programming. I don't program anymore. I hire and fire people. So just a heads up on that. And then my ask is I've built a digital project for task management, especially if you work with team members and you're trying to get your work organized and planned out and executed well. So all in under 2 minutes, you can get your to-do list, your task list up and running. You can get dashboards and you can get great visibility on, what needs to be done and what team members need to do it. And I'm just kind of looking for some people to give it a test run and give me some feedback on the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of real world usage.
I like how you slipped in real world there. Very nicely done. Speaking to our speaker, very nice. Thank you, Varen. And then we have one more, growth. And as I'm unmuting this, I'd also encourage you as a show of gratitude, if you want to leave any thoughts, any words of encouragement or thanks and gratitude to our speaker as we wrap up in the chat, that would be super appreciated. Genevieve has really been generous with her time, and I think it's some really interesting perspectives. So as I unmute our last give and ask, feel free to start populating that chat with some words of gratitude. So Jake Heath,
Yes, awesome.
last one, go for it.
Great interview, Genevieve. Thank you so much for doing this. I really like what you said about hiring slow and firing fast. And so my company is Jump Growth, software development agency. We've been in business for over 16 years under the name OTS Solutions. We are currently doing business as Jump Growth. And you know, I can give free consultation on software development needs, anything of that sort, business development as well. As far as my ask, if you know anybody who's interested in software development services, please send them my way. I'd be happy to talk with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. All right, guys, on that note, that is the end of our Founders Friday. Again, a big round of applause for Genevieve. Thank you so much for your time and great insights. You're such a great speaker, very approachable and inspirational. So thank you so much. And we hope to see many of you next Friday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Stay safe, please. All right, bye. Feel free to log off and leave a message.